Good morning.
Good morning.
An hour early. So we recognize that CVUUS gathers on the land of the Western Abenaki people. We respect their spiritual relationship to the land, and we hope that to learn from them how we can live together in peace and justice. I'm Ellen Flight, member of the worship team. So congratulations on getting here before the bell. For me, it was a 2 snooze button morning, but I set my clock ahead or half an hour later, however you want to look at it, so I would be on time. Whether you're an active member, friend, or are with us for the first time, it is delightful to see you, along with some of our familiar faces who have returned from places south to rejoin our service this morning and through till they go on another trip. The Wolfsons are back. So it's a good time to turn off your cell phone or put it into worship mode. And if you would like to would like to use our hearing assistance headphones, those can be found at the back where Liam, Mary, and Abby are holding down our electronics this morning. If you are visiting, we would love the opportunity to speak with you downstairs after the service at our coffee hour and gathering for refreshments. It's downstairs in the Ann Ross Fellowship Hall. And also, if you sign the visitor's book, then we'd love to share with you our newsletters. And it's also an important part of what we do as a congregation. In addition to our Sunday worship service, is to also connect. And so I want to share with you some of the pathways to connections that are coming this week, including an important one that's happening downstairs at coffee hour. Where is Richard? There's Richard. So if you look at Richard, you will see that he has many stickers on his self. And that is because this morning we have an environmental awareness coffee hour where various people like Richard have stickers to tell you what kind of environmental things they're happy to speak with you about this morning and share with you, so you may learn more and perhaps involve yourself. So I think Richard has insulation, heat pumps, and a third one on his self. But there'll be other people there on all sorts of different things. So grab a coffee, and they're all what? They're all related to your home, or how you may want your home. And Elise? So I would also just like to hold up that last week at a meeting after the service, CVUUS adopted the proposed covenant about dismantling racism and other oppressions. And we want to thank all the people who were involved in getting that meeting ready and being at the meeting, and also the affirmative vote to embrace dismantling racism and other oppressions. The Affordable Housing in Addison County group will be meeting on Monday, and as you know, this month our offering will be going to Housing First, and we have a person involved in that who's going to speak a little bit later. And because this is the last service before St. Patrick's Day, on Friday night there will be an open mic for down in the fellowship hall, and if you would like to be a part of that, you need to sign up by tomorrow or during social hour today. It's open to the public, and I guess, are you the person for them to find to sign up? Carol, Hardin, and Ronnie, and Ravel, you can speak to any of those folks. So it should be, the last one was great, and we hope you'll attend this one. Okay? And now we will rise as you are able in body or spirit to sing our gathering song this morning, which is Spirit of Life. 123 in the gray hymnal. the impulse to go a second time, I see. I don't know, it's fine, but it is, for me, I'm always moved to sing it a second time, so, but it's fine, Ronnie, thank you. Well, that's true, that's true. Next time, stay standing. All right, our call to worship this morning is an excerpt from a reading by Kathleen McTeague, found in a book called Lifting Our Voices, which is a book to help us as we lead worship. So, and though we each walk within a vast loneliness, the promise we offer here is that we do not walk alone. This is a holy place that we gather. The light of the earth brought in and held, touched then by our answering light. The flame on the chalice, the flicker of a candle, the lamps of our open faces brought near. In this place of silence and celebration, solemnity and music, we make a sanctuary and name our home. While John lights our chalices, we can join together to say the chalice lighting in your order of service and on the screen. In times of darkness, we stumble towards the tiny flame. In times of cold, we see the warming fire. In times of repression, we reach for the lamp of truth. In times of loss, we pray for the comforting light. In times of joy, we light a candle of celebration. Spirit of life, as we kindle this light, help us find what we need this day. And now I do see that Poppy is here, and so we will have, oh, sorry.
No worries.
John has an announcement, an important announcement, and then we will have Poppy.
I just wanted to say good morning, and
Oh, yeah.
I know, I didn't want to
Yeah, you can,
push you off the box.
yeah.
Good morning. No, it's wonderful to see all of you this morning. I'm just here to thank you, all of you who have pledged so far for this year's Standing on the Threshold of Our Future. Gratitude to all of you, whether you've pledged or not. I just want to let you know that we are at roughly the halfway point. So we have more mountain to climb together, and I look forward to chatting with anyone, as does Kate, if they have questions, if they just want to have a conversation about how important this canvas is as we head into lots of transition, huge opportunities, probably a few challenges along the way. But thank you, gratitude. I am going to sneak out after the children because Kate and I are going away for the week. So I just wanted to see you all before we split. Thank you. Oh, you don't need this either.
I feel like there's some metaphor somehow in like we're a community that doesn't push each other off the box. I don't know. I don't know what it means. I just feel like there's something there. Someone can work on that. So the time for our allegiance today is a story about giving. At the very end of it, I'm going to just have a very short question that I'll leave you with. Usually I read the stories myself, but I had walking pneumonia, and so I'm totally better now, except for a cough that starts if I talk a lot. So I thought rather than risking it, I would steal somebody else's voice. So enjoy.
And now, Extra Yarn. Written by Mac Barnett. Illustrated by John Clausen. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town, where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soot from chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. So she went home and knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars, too. But there was still extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. And even after she made a sweater for Nate and his dog, and for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet!" shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone! Annabelle, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." But it turned out she could. And she did. Even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad, and for Mr. Pendleton, and Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Louis. She made sweaters for everyone, except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters or even long pants, and who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat. And even then, Annabelle still had extra yarn. She made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats, and for other animals too. Soon, people thought, soon Annabelle would run out of yarn. But it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Things began to change in that little town. News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day, an archduke, who was very fond of clothes, sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle. "Little girl," said the archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I'm willing to offer you $1,000,000. "No, thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The archduke's mustache twitched. "2,000,000, he said. Annabelle shook her head. "No, thanks." "10,000,000, shouted the archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabelle. "I won't sell the yarn." And she didn't. So that night, the archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house, and they stole the box and took it to the archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea, back to his castle. The archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box, and he lifted its lid, and he looked inside. His mustache quivered, it shivered, it trembled. The archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You will never be happy again." But It turned out she was.
So, the question that I will leave all of you with is, why was the box empty when the Archduke opened it? So, ponder that in your hearts while we leave. All right, so kidlings, this is us. Let's go to RE.
So we'll sing our regular song. Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our hearts to see what is true. Open our hearts to love one another. And may we walk in peace. Let's open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our hearts to see what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one
And I invite you to stay standing because we're just going to keep singing for a minute. And we're going to move right into We'll Build a Land, which is 121 in the Great Hymnal, and the words are up here for people who are familiar with the singing.
Thank
where justice shall roll down like waters. Many of you will recognize one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s favorite phrases in his talk about beloved community. And we wanted that hymn this week to remind ourselves that we committed ourselves last Sunday to building beloved community and following that model when we adopted our new social action covenant. And one of the things that's related to that covenant is how we share with outside groups who are doing things that represent our values. Sometimes the groups are very big and established, and sometimes they're pretty new ventures and very local. This month we're sharing with the latter type of outside venture, and Mary Beth is here to tell us more about it. So I invite you up before we take our offering.
Yeah, I guess I will. Yeah. Oh, no. Guess. Oh my gosh. Morning. Yeah. It's so good to be. I can't even tell you. I haven't been in a church service in probably 30 years. So this is like a gorgeous experience. I know. Yeah. I forgot what the intention of being in a faith community was because of various reasons. So thank you. That felt really good to sing together. And so thank you. My name is Mary Simmons, and I live in Lincoln in a little teeny house, small house, shouldn't say tiny house. I live in a small house that I built with my partner about 10 years, and I'm super thankful to have that home. And fairly regularly when I'm in a hot shower, I think, oh my gosh, this feels real good to be in a hot shower. And then I think a lot of people don't have that. And that was one of the reasons that joined a few of us to create Homes First. So I think Jean mentioned last week, Homes First is just a group of maybe 5, 10 of us. It's not even like a classic nonprofit where some people get paid and then there's a board that oversees them. Like we literally are just the people that came together just to do the work. So, and some people come regularly. Some people are like, hey, call me when you need this skill. I've got it for you. You know, so I say that to, you know, invite you to join us in our monthly meetings and in any capacity that you have. But if nothing else, thank you for the offering for this month, I guess. So yes, how I got involved, it started in 2019. I have a program, I was a teacher for middle school and high school for a while, 20s, 30s, and then in my late 30s, I started a program called Conversations from the Open Road. And I did that because I was in the classroom and not really relating with students. And I was dying to get out and learn from the world, and I felt like we were all feeling that way. So I started this program where we go on these 3-week road trips and learn about some issue, and we go drive to some community in the country that's kind of enacting some beautiful, inspiring, resilient response to it. And in 2019, and I had done it for about 8 years, started in 2011, 12, met beautiful people all across the country doing wonderful work, but every time the students would come back and it felt like we learned about an issue, cool. And then it kind of we made these films and it kind of informed people and didn't really go anywhere. So I was chomping at the bit to find something that was concrete, grounded in something the students and myself could actually do. So, okay, well, let's go to the basics. Food, shelter, love, like those are kind of what we all need. So then 2019, winter, trying to figure out what am I gonna do with this summer with students? Oh my gosh, I read this teeny little rectangle in the Ad Indy that says there's a few people getting together to talk about maybe bringing tiny homes into Addison County. Oh my gosh, how neato is that? So I meet and I go into the room and it's 2 wonderful women, Andrea Galliano and Ingrid Pixley, and they had just met once or twice with just that resolve of, oh my gosh, people need homes, what are we gonna do? So the 3 of us just chatted, once every few weeks. We would meet for 2 hours, meeting with different people. And then I was like, why don't I take the students across the country to learn from, because there's gorgeous examples of communities raising funds and building homes for people that need it all around. So I brought a group of 9 students. We drove across the country, stopped in Syracuse, learned from Andrew, who's doing this in a beautiful way in Syracuse, then Carmen, who's doing it in a gorgeous way in Ithaca, New York, then Detroit, Faith Fowler is doing amazing work in Detroit with this, Madison, Wisconsin, Portland, Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, just, oh my gosh, the village there that's been created is gorgeous, of just people that need homes, tiny houses, all different and beautiful. Anyway, made a film, 20 minutes, and I invite you to check that out. I it's actually, I have a FAQ about Homes First, and it's on the back of that QR code that'll send you there. But so it's about 20 minutes, and it just shows all these people doing this where it shouldn't be more complex than just the simplicity of we all know in our bodies people need homes, right? Like for what if you want to like, you know, play games with why and who deserves it and all that stuff, you can play those games, but people need homes. And so we kept plugging away, and now, as Jean mentioned last week, Hanford Career Center, those students are building the first one. And we can do more, right? We can build these homes. It's not complex. I can say that because I have built a small cabin and a small home. It really isn't. It's Legos, just bigger. And there's a lot, of course, there's skills. I'm not denying there's not skills involved, but we can get, we get people on the board that can do that, help us. So we're raising money to build more homes, and ultimately it'd be wonderful to have the village model of, say, 9 to 10 small, beautiful homes, like a pocket neighborhood. I think that's how our zoning calls it. And we're in conversations, and I won't get into the specifics, but there's a few really inspiring conversations happening about land that we might be able to do this. But anyway, so we're looking for land, looking for people to do whatever that means to you, and then we're also looking for money that just pays for materials. That's all it's paying for. So yeah, I think that's plenty. I mean, you come up to 2023, so it's been 4 or 5 years that we've been in this. And I'm on the COSA, Circle of Support and Accountability, people coming out of incarceration. They meet with 4 volunteers every week. I'm in a bunch of those panels, and I can tell you that people are still in prison because they can't get out because there's no housing. So it's ridiculous. We know this, we all know this. So yes, I just want to say thank you, and I don't want us to get caught in the complexity that all of our systems make everything seem to be. It really is just simple. We can build homes and just do that for people that need homes. Yeah. So thanks so much. Thank you. And I have an FAQ sheet, I guess, afterwards.
Well, maybe you'll come to our coffee hour downstairs afterwards, and you can speak with her more specifically. Yeah. So right now, be as generous as you can as the baskets come through the congregation. And thank you, Mary, very much.
I have one written milestones and passages card that I received today. It's from Poppy. As a lot of you know, her dad, Jerry Loney, went up to UVM, the hospital last week, and he's coming home today. That's the good news. The bad news is he has lost vision in one eye, and they still aren't sure why. And he has an infection that's going to require some very complicated intravenous treatments over the next week or two, or maybe even longer, depending on what germ this turns out to be. He'll be at home, but not in a situation where he can receive a lot of visitors. So there's going to be a lot of things that we can do for them elsewise, food-wise, and things like that in the coming weeks, and we'll definitely keep you apprised of when Jerry and Bobby can be helped out in that way. It's going to be a long road forward. You never want to be a medical mystery, but he's stuck in that situation right now. Nothing that looks life-threatening, but just a lot of recovery and on a path that we don't know exactly what it is. So each week, there's a lot of unspoken joys and concerns and milestones and passages, and it's very important in our service to leave a couple of minutes of silence for you to get in touch with what's on your heart before we proceed, and we'll do that right now.
Hi, everybody. As the choir comes up here, I just want to say a quick word. We're going to sing for you Mahalia Jackson's Lord Don't Move This Mountain. This is a unison choir anthem, so everybody up here is singing the same thing, so it'll power. And we invite you to join us if you pick it up along the way.
Don't move this mountain.
So, little program note, we got ambitious this week. There's a lot of music in it. And I'm making an executive decision to save, though I may speak for next week, because it really fits what I'm going to be talking about next week as well. We do want to hear a testimonial from Steve and Priscilla related to what I'm going to be talking about in this sermon. They were going to be here, but they've been exposed to COVID, and so they did this on as a video for us. So, hit it, Mary.
Hi, I'm Steve Meyer.
And I'm Priscilla Bremser. We have been members of CVUUS for 34 and a half years, which is easy to remember because our oldest child, Eric, was 2 years old at the time.
When Kate and John asked us to share some thoughts today on what CVUUS means to us, there was so much to choose from. So we decided to try some verbal snapshots. Here goes.
Our younger kids, Brian and Jeff, complaining all the way to church about going at all, and then full of observations and questions after a neighboring faith's site visit.
Especially in the early days of the church, Gus Swift was always quietly helping out. Gus was Artley Wolfson's father, and whenever he didn't want a lot of recognition, so whenever you saw anonymous, for example, in a budget sheet or somewhere else, that was usually Gus.
The first time the choir sang in the new space, so different from where we had been before. It was magical.
Our first settled minister, Johanna Nichols, loved to raise money for the church. She used to say something like, I'm sure I'm paraphrasing, in what other parts of your life do you get to support a budget that aligns so well with your values?
One of our first meeting places was the library in East Middlebury, and the kids and the RE leaders would meet downstairs, and there was a big, tall cupboard that Merle Schloff had built, and it opened up to reveal a bunch of shelves where all the RE materials were kept, and then there were lovely painting on the outside, which I'm sure was due to Catherine.
During the capital campaign that led to the building of this new building, I had the honor and the pleasure of meeting with Avid Fenn, as in the Fenn House, to hear him offer his condominium to the church as part of the campaign.
There was a moment during a service in that old building where Francois lit a candle to commemorate his first swim across the deep end of the pool at Middlebury College, and that brought me to tears.
When it was time to move into the new building, we met on a Sunday morning up at the old building up near Cross Street, and we all went out into the middle of Water Street and paraded down the street, all dressed up in colors and fire stalls, and that was, there's some nice pictures of that.
A more traditional way of running a canvas is to have members of the canvas team visit people in their homes or visit with people in coffee shops or something like that. And the primary purpose of that sort of meeting was to check in on how things were going. How are things going for you at the church? What are you enjoying? What would you do differently? And I always enjoyed those. Lots of beautiful ideas came out of that.
I've been known to say that there are hundreds of small miracles that happen in this congregation. And the funny thing about them is that they're always, you can count on them happening. You just have to be looking for them. You have to be open to them.
My dad used to visit us for, he's famous for the 36-hour visit, but if it happened over a Sunday, he would come with us to church. And I was raised as in a congregational church, sort of, and so he was not that familiar with UU theology, but I just remember him sitting, it's such a dad thing to do. He would sit there and take notes on his order of service of ideas that caught him as he was listening to a sermon.
Another little snapshot for me is just all the faces I've noticed since COVID, just in the last year or two. So welcome and thank you to all the people that have started coming more recently.
Anne Hennessy was a member of the choir, and she was an alto, so I sang with her. She had a lovely voice. And toward the end of her life, she lost the ability to read music. But she still came to choir, and no matter what note came out of her mouth at any given time, it was a perfect fit for what we were singing.
So as we've looked back at these little vignettes, there are a few things that stood out to us. First, of course, is that these are just a fraction. There's so many more that we could have chosen. Secondly, we've named some names. You may not know them all or the events that we mentioned, but we hope you could get a sense of the many different ways that this community has supported us and enhanced our lives and enriched our lives. So while we know that the details of your experiences will be different than ours, we honor those differences
And we suggest that these kinds of
Yeah.
experiences are available to all. So jump in, show up, say yes, take in, give back, be an active part of this community. We did, and we are so glad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's such a nice lead-in. For those of you who are visiting for the first time, this is an annual event that I jokingly call, well, I'll go to church anyway Sunday, because it's about stewardship of our building and our congregation, and some people view it as kind of a duty to listen to that sermon, especially if they've been listening year after year for many years. And then when you combine it with the change in the clock, where you have a perfect excuse to come to coffee hour and say, oh, I forgot, but skip the service. I'm like really appreciative there's so many people here. I just want to say what I have to say, and I'll try to keep it brief because we have such a stuffed surface. It's kind of a bookend to Kate and John's service introducing this year's Standing on the Threshold of Our Future campaign in January, and then last week with their wonderful, wonderful story about the amazing week in which the choir stoles appeared out of what had been nothing on Monday to surprise the minister Johanna Nichols at her installation, and involving over 50 people sewing round the clock and all kinds of, it was an amazing adventure. And I was thinking it's kind of lovely that an essential part of my minister's job, the annual stewardship sermon, this year has evolved into something that's more like a conversation. It's a response to what the congregation has already been talking about so much, instead of me kicking things off. And that I'm able to deliver this response from the perspective of, I'm in my 11th year, I'm stepping down, but I'm looking forward to being a congregant of yours after that transition. You know, I have a number of years where I have to stay out of your hair, but I'm not looking at it like the most ministers who leave in their last year and are really going from the congregation. So when I talk about stewardship, maybe it's a little bit different. You know, a lot of you have pledged, some of you will over the next month as the congregation completes the stewardship campaign, and you'll add your voices to Steve and Priscilla. So when I first thought of where do I fit into all of this year, I thought, oh, this is going to be the easiest stewardship sermon of all. I'll just look over the last 10, choose the highlights, and quilt them together, and easy peasy, all done. And then I thought about it some more, and I thought I really owed you instead something more like a diary, where I'm really looking into myself and just hitting some points that strike me as really important right now. And looking through those 10 years of sermons, I realized that there were 3 things I kept coming back to, things that I felt you needed to hear. One is that we hate talking about money in church, and some people think of it as an example of a church going off the rails when it's talking about money. And I just think that that's just totally the wrong understanding of money, which is one of the most amazing inventions in human history. And there's a saying I've shared with you sometimes from the 19th century about God made food for all the little birds, but he didn't throw it in the nest. And so everybody has to go out and work constantly to get their food. Well, you know, money actually can be deposited in nests all over the world almost instantaneously. It's an amazing, amazing invention that no other animal has, although some animals have very rudimentary forms of exchange. And someday maybe Mark will give a sermon on that, our resident animal behavior specialist. But I really think that money ought to be treated like owl. We're known for being way out in front in our human sexuality training for our kids, the Our Whole Lives program. We don't have anything comparable going in training about money, but in some ways, it's just as amazing and just as complicated as sex, and it can be abused or it can be great depending on how it's done. And so I think that we actually ought to be welcoming a chance to look at the question of money in church. And all of the good reasons about not talking about it are true. It's a very sensitive subject. People can be harmed, and if you talk about it the wrong way in a service and you don't have a chance to work through that, you've done a lot of harm. But this actually ties into the Social Action Covenant we passed last Sunday with introducing accountability into what we're trying to be conscious of and what we do. And what we do with our money is really accountability in capital letters. In fact, I put it in accountability in capital letters in my little notes that I have here. So I want us to break the habit of thinking money as being about money. And I will recall one little thing from one of my first stewardship sermons. In fact, it was my first stewardship sermon here in the spring of 2013. It was pre-COVID, and we had a lot of kids, and I did a thing with the kids where I told about my adventure when I had an internship at a Shinto temple in Japan, and I was taken to Kyoto, and I was taken to the Roanji rock gardens, which are this amazing expanse of little rocks with little islands of green in them and little rocks on the green. And when you stare at them long enough, you lose all perspective. And it looks like seas and lands and continents and everything like that. And everything gets transformed. And then I told the kids about Mitch Kramer's money project 20 years ago when we started raising money for what eventually led to moving to this building. So what he did was he had all the kids bringing in pennies week after week. Mitch, how many did you end up with in total? 30,000 pennies, which actually proved to be kind of a challenge to get rid of. But one of the things Mitch did was people brought in what they thought were pennies, kids did, but they were actually coins from other lands. And so Mitch made a collection of, I have 2 cases like this, and he mounted them, and he labeled which lands they were from. And so then I took some of those, and I invited the kids up. We had a big sand field here, and I invited them to put the coins in the sand field just in little relationships to each other that made a beautiful pattern for them, so that the money stopped being money and it became something that you make something beautiful with. So that's what we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about our stewardship. Point one. The second point came up. There was an email exchange this week, and it started with Tom sending a picture he took of his daughter Amaya during the social action discussion last week after the service. And Amaya was over on the edge there by that window drawing and taking, standing there and occupying herself. And I think, do we have a picture of this? Yeah, go back up a second. There's Amaya. She was there just doing that. And Tom said, here's a picture of Amaya while we were discussing and voting on adopting the 8th principle. Always listening and thinking, this one. To which Mike Greenwood responded in email, she sure was, as I noticed at some point she raised her hand when someone said there were few people of color. And there, after that, the next thing in the exchange was a note from Poppy saying, I wish I could have been there to see that. Poppy was home being sick. Which is the responsible thing to do, be home when you're sick. But, you know, when you're not here, you sometimes miss those golden moments. Now, I told Tom, if I shared this conversation, that I would tell you, don't go up to Amaya and start talking to her about it. It was just a revelatory moment, and it needs to stay that way. We don't need to change that moment. But what did it reveal? It revealed that we're here for things that happen across the generations. It revealed that talking about justice matters, and all kinds of things flow from it. And being in the room or as close as you can be on Zoom matters, and so many more things when you start thinking about it. That same meeting, I want to just lift up one other thing that matters. Carrie Duquette Hoffman called into that meeting from Dubai, where she was on vacation. That's a level of dedication that's very important because Carrie's the incoming president of the board starting next year. So that gives you something to look forward to. So this same level of imagination allows you to see all these little things and allowed Steve and Priscilla to think about little things. There's so much that goes on that very few of us see, or sometimes none of us see. I did some marriage counseling this week for the granddaughter of a member who has no connection with us, you would think, but now has an indirect connection with us. This is something that happens because we have a community where you have me working for you to help spread your values. The discretionary fund that you've given me, I've used it to provide fuel oil for a BIPOC single mother so she could move into housing, which she wouldn't have been able to move into if she didn't have enough oil to heat it when she moved in, all without any breach of privacy or anything like that. That's something you did that you never knew about. I provide temporary shelter for 4 or 5 years for a man who kept going back and forth through Middlebury one night at Brandon Lodge every time he went through. And at the end of 5 years, he sent me a note, said he'd finally found permanent housing up in the Burlington area. And I wasn't his only stop. There was a church up in Burlington where he also had a relationship. But this was just something that happened behind the scenes that's all part of what comes out of this community. And then we have the Caring Network, which is more visible in all the things we do. So there's something different about all the other groups that all of us support in our lives that are very, very important when the community is dedicated to being here for all of these unseen effects. You know, NPR, which I love, has a mission. Planned Parenthood has a mission. Town Hall Theater has a mission. And most of the things that happen out of it are not unseen effects. They're very vital contributions to our lives, and that's why we support them in our offering. They're part of our values. But this is the only organization I know that's assembled simply to do good in whatever form we can encounter it, and to find out how to do that in community. So this actually leads me to my final point. It's the hardest one for me to share because it's the one I've wrestled with the most over the years, and I cannot give you an answer. It's what I would call a consumerist mindset. So when we come for the stewardship campaign, it's very natural to ask, what am I getting for my contribution? This is generally a good question because there's this concept of opportunity cost. When you give financial resources to something, you're not using them for something else, and presumably something valuable. So you need to ask what the opportunity cost is, and I've wrestled with that all my life as a UU in all my donations. Everybody has good reasons for putting limits on their generosity towards CVUUS. For me, a lot of it comes out of my family life. My wife is actually, since she retired, doing a lot of the work for the church completely in the Caring Network and teaching Al, but she has no relationship to the church anyway. As a Jewish woman, she actually feels like she could never actually be completely here or be a member. But so everything I give is sort of a negotiation of how much of this is actually at the expense of what we do as a couple. And I think a lot of us are in that shape. There's different levels of devotion to CVUUS. And that's all very reasonable. But at the end, I think it comes down to what I end up sharing is all towards making a better me, being in better contact with my better angels and what I can do, and that benefits not just my family, but everything I do. And so translating this into what it means for you, the single biggest resource in this congregation is not the wealth of its members, it's not what we have in savings, it's not the building. The single biggest resource of this congregation is named you, which delightfully is both individual and collective. And when you act as stewards for this idea, it becomes we, most powerful pronoun of all. So I want to close by recalling a story I shared with you in my very first stewardship sermon. And this is what indigenous people call a teaching story. It's drawn from one man's experience of a life-threatening failure as far away from Earth as any human has ever traveled. Jerry Elliott today is 80 years old. He's an Osage and Cherokee native who lives in Oklahoma. His fascination with space travel as a young man led him to work at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and he rose through the ranks. He became the retrofire officer for the Apollo 13 moon mission in 1970. So his main job on that mission was going to be calculating the speed and the angle for the capsule to make a safe re-entry into Earth. But before they could land on the moon, some of you may recall, or you may have seen the Tom Hanks movie and remember that, they had a failure, a major failure of an oxygen tank. They had to abort the moon landing, and the question of whether they could get 3 astronauts back alive was dire. And they did it against extremely long odds. And when he reflected back on all the adjustments and everything that was done in that crisis, he wrote about it using his Native American name, J.C. High Eagle. And this is what he wrote. In life, many thoughts are born in the course of a moment, an hour, a day. Some are dreams, some visions. Much energy is lost in fanciful dreams that never bear fruit, but visions are messages from the Great Spirit, each for a different purpose and life. To have a vision, one must be prepared to receive it, and when it comes, to accept it. The spiritual side of life knows everyone's heart and who to trust. How could a vision ever be given to someone to harbor if that person could not be trusted to carry it out? The message is simple. Commitment precedes vision. Commitment to your values, commitment to training to be who you want to be. And we do that in the goodness dimension here. So I invite you to carry that with you as we go into the week and as we sing our closing hymn, The Fire of Commitment. thank you for being here, for joining in that rousing hymn. And when you go downstairs, there'll be lots of time to socialize and share in a quiet way, no less important, in fact, sometimes more important, all the things we're actually doing in our homes to make the world a better place to live. And take that spirit with you out into the world. There is so much to be done that's big, but all of it gets done by doing a lot of little things first. And together, we can cumulatively figure out how to do that. Blessed be.